Today I'm going to tell you about why Tom Herman decided to bring in former KU coach David Beatty and whether or not that's over the line. And all that's coming up after the bumper.
What do you mean you don't subscribe to my son's YouTube channel?
Mama, no!
Just snap the damn ball, RJ.
What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. It's always OU related, college football related, sports related. We have a good time. But before we get into why former Kansas head coach David Beatty is consulting for Tom Herman, Mack Brown to North Carolina? And here's the thing. I could understand it if North Carolina couldn't find someone to take the job. Perhaps they put a phone call into Cliff Kingsbury early and he said no, maybe. But when I looked at the other folks on the list who were in the running for this job, Ohio State offensive coordinator Ryan Day and Georgia defensive coordinator Mel Tucker, and then you go with Mack Brown? Now, I understand Mack Brown has North Carolina ties because he was there before he took over the Texas job. But this guy's been out of football for a long time in football years. We're seeing how this is working for John Gruden and the Oakland Raiders. And I don't necessarily like this trend of bringing these guys back into the fold because kids don't know Mack Brown. They were in kindergarten when he and Vince Young did their thing in 2005. The way kids know Mack Brown is he's a talking head on TV who doesn't really like hip or hop and probably doesn't put those two words together in a sentence. So when it comes to recruiting, what are you going to do? Go get Tim Brewster? I mean, okay, but I just think that you had an opportunity to go get two of the hottest coordinators in college football, and you settled on a guy who's been sitting behind a desk in a studio for years. Whatever. I'm going to tell you why Texas coach Tom Herman has brought in former Kansas coach David Beatty to basically consult. Now, what he told media was, yes, I'm bringing in David Beatty this week to prepare for Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship game. He said to take a look at their tendencies and their signals from the Texas sideline. Now, you might notice that Kansas actually played Texas pretty well. The score ended up being 24-17, and it was much tighter than you might have thought from a Kansas team that I continue to believe outperformed its talent. They were a bad team that actually looked pretty good, especially on defense. They were sound. Clint Bowen did a good job. But what David Beatty was apparently able to do was know what Tom Herman was running, and he wants to be able to curtail that. Now, you can take it with a grain of salt about whether or not that's the reason that he's bringing in David Beatty. It is the reason that he's saying out loud, and that seems like a good thing. But you also got to wonder if he's bringing in David Beatty because, number one, that dude was calling the plays for Kansas against Oklahoma. And number two, he did a really good job of putting Puka Williams into positions where he could gash Oklahoma in the run defense. And that was something that up until recently, we all thought that Oklahoma was pretty decent at, which was defending the run. And against Kansas, that certainly was not the case. Puka Williams had over 250 yards on the ground, and it didn't seem like you had an answer for him except to give the ball back to the offense and go score. Now, bringing in a guy who was coaching against both of those teams immediately following the end of the regular season rubbed Lincoln Riley the wrong way when he was asked about it on the podium. He was like, I don't like the precedent that it sets. And it was clear to him that he felt that, it's not against the rules, but it is in bad form, for which Tom Herman doesn't care. Like, that's the one thing that we all know about Tom Herman, and everybody should get to know about Tom Herman now, is if he ain't going to get in trouble for it, he's probably going to do it. And I understand because he's at the University of Texas where they don't suffer a loser very well. They don't even suffer a guy who finishes 2 games above 500 very well, just like Oklahoma in that instance. At Austin, it feels like they want to win, and sometimes they haven't had a guy who's willing to do anything it takes to get the wins that matter. And OU Texas in particular, but the Big 12 title game with OU Texas for the first time since 1903, the two teams are playing in the same year twice. Yeah, everything's on the table right now because Texas fans want to be back in the worst way. and they would love to do it at the expense of Oklahoma, not once, but twice. And Tom Herman gets that in his DNA. So for that, I commend him. But bringing in David Beatty, if you think that's going to help you, fine. At that point, what are we talking about? You're going to give the ball to Trey Watson and Keontae Ingram and expect them to win you the football game? No, you're not going to go away from what you do well, which is put the ball in Sam Hargy Ellinger's hands and say, throw it to those big, tall wide receivers, LJ Humphrey and Colin Johnson, against the smaller Oklahoma cornerbacks. That's what you're going to do. And I think this is more of a story because Lincoln Riley also has a trump card in his pocket where he could call his brother, who was on David Beatty's staff at Kansas. Now, he was asked whether or not he would do that, and he said no comment. But we can see what this game means for both teams. Tom Herman telegraphed, I'm pulling out all the stops. I have nothing else to lose by bringing in a David Beatty, especially if it helps me win a football game. Where Lincoln Riley's like, if David Beatty is able to tell about Texas tendencies and Texas signals, perhaps my brother, who's also out of a job and probably could be doing the brotherly love thing, would give me the same information. So I don't necessarily think that this is a good thing for Tom Herman because in this particular case, Lincoln Riley's the perfect guy to counter it. If anything, the only thing that's bad about it is that it got out that David Beatty is going down there to consult. Also, David Beatty's a guy who's looking for a job. And if he can get on Texas's staff and get a job, more power to him. But I gotta believe that you talk to everybody about everything they've seen who's willing to talk to you when it comes to playing Oklahoma or playing Texas. If you're Texas, it's about stopping Oklahoma's offense. If you're Oklahoma, it's about beating Texas's defense. All right, that's it for me. Deuces.